Hey everybody, May 14th, 2023. I'm going to talk to you about Ukraine and the corporations that are taking over and owning the land in Ukraine. But we're going to go back to an article in the Il Manifesto, Italy, from June 3rd, 2022, before we talk about present day. The title is "The Truth About Corporations Taking Over Ukrainian Agriculture Lands," written by Luca Kalada. A text has recently spread on social media, including on the Facebook, alleging that 3 large U.S. multinationals bought 17 million hectares of prime land from Zelensky. Previously, rumors of such an alleged sale of half of Ukraine to Monsanto, Cargill, and DuPont have been amplified across a small galaxy of various pro-conspiracy sites that in some versions also pin the responsibility on the usual suspects, George Soros, the global financial elites, the Warren Buffett, the Bill Gates, the Blackstone, the Blackrock, the Vanguard investment funds. We'll get into that later on. Sorry about the background here, just at the beach. So while people call these conspiracy theories, there was an element of truth behind these rumors back in June, connecting the economic interests converging on the Ukraine since well before the Russian invasion. For several years now, a series of reports by the Oakland Institute Economic Observatory have documented the macroeconomic interests that have made the former Soviet Republic an object of intense contention since the fall of the USSR. Now, when we look at the post-Soviet Ukraine, it's 32 million arable hectares of rich and fertile black soil known as Chernozem. And if you pay attention to any of the war or how we can fight and what we can do, you can't even move tanks through this black soil. This super fertile soil it's like quicksand for machines, but perfect for growing. So this land has the equivalent of 1/3 of all of existing agriculture land in the European Union. 1/3 of the European Union's existing farm agricultural land. That's huge, guys. With the end of the socialist collectivization, an unprecedented amount of the virgin hectares have come into play to be put on the market and potentially tasty morsel for banks and the agribusiness multinationals. So for those that don't know, Ukraine, with its 64 million tons of grain and seeds annually, it's among the world's largest producers of barley, wheat, and sunflower oil. For the latter, Ukraine produces nearly 30% of the world's total. Since the 1990s, the race has been on for businesses to get their hands on what Jeff Rowe, DuPont's director for Europe, describes as one of the fastest growing agricultural markets in the world. Now, of course, the conversion of Ukraine into the capitalism world has followed the usual pattern. A class of oligarchs and narrow elite have enriched themselves disproportionately by despoiling the public sector with the complicity of the public class. Sorry, I just got a message on Rumble. And of course, let's go back to 2014, the events of the maiden coup, instigated and funded by the Victoria Nulands of the USA, NATO bullshit, right? The Western camp prevailed while Putin retaliated by taking Crimea and the waging war in Donbass. You got to realize the people in Donbass are all ethnic speaking Russians. They're living in Ukraine, but they're Russian-speaking ethnics that have been bombed by the Ukraine military since 2014 as well, killing estimated tens of thousands of people with military bombing of the Donbass, and they made it illegal for them to speak their Russian language. You wouldn't be very welcome. You wouldn't feel very welcome in that country either, right? Would you now? And you got to look back at the leaders, Yankovic, right? The clash in the opposition with Yushchenko. Man, those are tough names. This all goes back to the West versus Putin, and what's happening in Ukraine, right? The West wants their puppet leader in there, which they have right now, with the current Zelensky and the one before him. So with the 2014 coup and putting in the puppet regime controlled by the USA, it's the beginning of the annexation into Euro-Atlantic economic sphere described, as the corporate takeover of Ukrainian agriculture. which gives an account of the redoubled push by Western financial institutions to throw open the nation's vast agricultural sector to foreign corporations, foreign ownership, foreign profits. And of course, as it has today, but before, from the West came arms and money in the form of assistance packages from the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the UN, the EU, the United Nations voted, remember, to not investigate the Nord Stream pipeline. It's just another example. They are all for this. They are part of the West, the geopolitical five, the France, the Macron, the Australia, the USA, the Canada, the group of terrorists, I call them. So before the 2014 coup, as early as 2013, for instance, the World Bank provided an $89 million loan for the development of a deed and land title program needed for the commercialization of state-owned and cooperative lands in Ukraine. Furthermore, the Western banks are imposing the optimization and consolidation of agri-businesses into large entities at the expense of small producers who constitute the majority of the country. So the Walmarts, the Costco's come in there and then they tell all the small businesses that, oh, you need to close down, and then the big ones, just flash back to COVID bullshit, right? Now, despite the huge land sales to foreigners by 2016 after the 2014 coup by Victoria Nuland, 10 multinational agricultural corporations had already come to control 2.8 million hectares of land. Today, that's estimated at 3.4 million hectares in the hands of foreign companies and Ukrainian companies with foreign funds as shareholders. Foreign interest control, guys. There's even, in this article, it says there's even estimates as high as 6 million hectares. The moratorium on sales, to which the U.S. Department, IFM, and World Bank had repeatedly called to be removed, was finally repealed by Zelensky's government in 2020 ahead of a final referendum on the issue for the 2024. Furthermore, in January, a report by USAID, the U.S. Agency for Assistance Cooperation, lamented the absence of reliable land markets in the country that was limiting economic growth. So, despite the fact that the analysis by Open Democracy published in October revealed that 10 private companies controlled 71% of the Ukrainian agricultural market, including in addition to the Ukrainian oligarchs, multinational corporations such as Archer Daniels Midland ADM, Bunge, Cargill, Louis Dreyfus, and the Chinese state-owned company COFCO. Okay, now let's move on to nowadays, in May 2023. Here's an article on businesstoday.in. President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, recently met with the management team of Blackrock, so this is last week, the world's largest asset managing company, to discuss the creation of an investment fund aimed at restoring the country's economy through public and private capitalization. And so here's a good here's a good tweet. Taxpayers pay for the war bills, private firms get the profits. Ukraine being privatized and sold off to companies like BlackRock, another said. Absolutely. There's another comment on Twitter. I wonder what he has left to sell in terms of Zelensky. Here's another good quote. Ukraine being privatized and sold off to companies like BlackRock while being enslaved to the IMF and US and EU through crippling debt. That's right. There's just a massive amounts of debts, and the debt is the new war machine. It's part of the huge war machine where you make all the money. Think about, since World War II, how many countries have finally just paid off their debt from World War II? And of course, just last month, it keeps going. Biden has to keep sending more money. He's already sent how many billions? I lost track. But every month he's got to say, oh, we're going to send more. So last month they announced another $325 million in new military aid for Ukraine on Wednesday. So it's just a few days ago, or 4 days ago, to help its military in its war against Russia, including additional ammunition for high mobility artillery rocket systems, advanced missiles, and anti-tank mines. Yeah. Well, it's getting super hot out here, guys. So to summarize, I was just watching Redacted the other day, and they said, it was 2 days ago, that now BlackRock officially owns 30% of Ukraine. 30%. These companies are taking over the land, they're taking ownership, they are gonna make money producing whatever they want, whether it's the oil or the crops, using the land, money laundering, of course, and running slavery and child labor camps, etc., selling slaves off around the world, just continuing on with the Biden family tradition, guys. This is Irnieracing News. Thanks for watching. Keep on keeping on.